Watchers, welcome back. Today I'm featuring a piece from another new company, a company that I haven't featured before. So you can see there, Boldr Supply Company, and the model, kind of gives it away on the packaging. It's a Voyager. So straight up, I found it interesting to read that they call themselves Boldr Supply Company rather than Boldr Watch Company. I'm not sure why that is, and if you know, I would like to hear any insights on that, because it's not immediately obvious on the website. So Boldr is Southeast Asian based, so Singapore and Malaysia, where I'm from, in fact. So they are established with the goal of producing timepieces for the urban adventurers of the world, and they aim to make gear that is described as stylish, functional, and ready for adventure. And I think most of their pieces do meet some of that criteria, some of the goals that they have stipulated, and they do seem to have some popularity and following, at least from what I've heard about some of their earlier models. This one is not the first model by any means, but it is a later model that I have been sent. So, there we go. That's the packaging. Kind of interesting to see how it came out, actually, as I saw this out of the box. It's fairly simple. It's just cardboard, but it's got an interesting look to it. And so it slips off, and you can see there's a bit of Boldr text there on the black package, black box here. Take that off, and then first thing you see is just a bit of advertising, really. The company motto, or one of their slogans: "Be bolder, be more." All right, warranty card, quite straightforward. So transparent warranty card, and then the manual is also pleasingly transparent. That's all it says: how to use the watch, basic directions, and most watch enthusiasts won't need a manual for this three-hander movement in the watch here. Limited warranty that they described there. Okay, put that aside, and then a couple of decorative stickers. Where would you use that? In the corner of a window or something? Car windscreen, a la Apple and other companies, they sometimes provide stickers. Okay. That's most of the packaging, and then just without further ado, let's just get the watch out and show it to you guys. So guys, here we have the Boldr Voyager, and in this color version is the Adriatic. So this is kind of this brass with blue. So they have a blue bezel insert model. That's a different name, but this one is the Adriatic, which is kind of a plain brass bezel without any insert and a blue strap. Okay, so this is what we're looking at here. The MSRP listed on the website is $299 USD. Any discount codes I've been given, I will list down the bottom that you can use to get any particular discounts off the price on the website. When I asked for this watch, it was still available. Currently, I just checked, it's actually listed as out of stock. I don't know how often they may come back into stock. Hopefully they will restock their watches periodically over time, because they seem to be popular enough, obviously, to sell out. Okay, so getting into the movement here. So the movement in this watch is none other than the Seiko NH35A, and I'll put the stats right on the left side of the screen there, and I'm not going to read it out. You know this probably off by heart, a lot of you by now, because it is actually one of the most common movements you see in watches in this price range. In this case, there is actually no date. So obviously, as you look at the watch, you don't see any date display. The NH35 does have a date, and they've chosen not to implement this, which some models do, and that's not a problem to me. Rated accuracy -20 +40 seconds per day that you can see there. In actual use, this is pretty astoundingly well regulated. It is +3 seconds per day that this has been running for me. So very, very well regulated. This watch has come out of the box. Okay, moving on to the case then. The case here is 42mm marine grade brass. This is what they've described the material as. Now 42mm is actually the bezel diameter. If you look at the case itself, hopefully you can see that the case is actually slightly narrower than the actual bezel, right? It actually goes in a bit. And if you measure just the case, it actually comes out as 41.2 millimeters with calipers. Thickness here is 14.8 millimeters, and that is thickness to the top of the dome glass there. On the website, it says 13.5, and 13.5 millimeters would be just taking the top of the bezel. If you take the glass into account, it's actually more like 14.8, close to 15 millimeters. If you look at the side profile, I think it doesn't actually suggest that it is 15 millimeters to the tops. So it actually looks and wears thinner than the actual measured thickness that I've gotten out of this watch. Okay, lug width in this case is 20 millimeters, so that's a 20 millimeter strap. And then the lug to lug distance between my thumbs is 49 millimeters there. So it's reasonable, and it does fit my particular wrist and probably does fit most people's wrists. The weight with this NATO strap is actually 115 grams. So there is some substance in there, particularly with the solidity of this case, but it is not too heavy by any means. It's actually fairly light on the wrist at 115 grams. Okay, moving on to the finishing. So I'll just show you the finishing. Right, you can see the bezel actually has a matte finish. It's not particularly brushed there. It does have, kind of raised numerals there. And I'll go into more detail on that as I describe the bezel. On the top surface of the lugs is actually circular brushing. Hopefully you can see that there. And then there's a matte bevel. So you can see there's a bevel there that doesn't have any particular brush. It's certainly not polished. It's kind of just a matte finish there. And it transitions to longitudinal brushing on the side there. The bottom surface of the lugs is also circular brushing. So hopefully you can see that as I show you the light, gliding along the case there. Okay, circular brushing on the bottom surfaces of the lugs as well. Now I just want to show you this case back. So let's quickly just slip that bit of the NATO strap out and just take a look at that. It's got a bit of interest there, isn't it? I mean, it's got basically what is this diving octopus motif, the octopus with a vintage dive helmet, which you often see in dive style watches and kind of is associated with the practice of scuba or underwater diving. Okay, so there's an embossed artwork there. They call it custom artwork on that steel case back. Okay, so that's what that is, and you can see several other descriptors around the case back, including the material, which is brass, as well as the movement, which it does tell you is actually the NH35A caliber. All right, screw-in case back, as well as a screw-down crown, and it's a nicely signed crown, I must say, with the company logo, as well as a crafted design on the crown, which makes it look like a piece of gear, kind of vintage gearing there. So with those features, the screw-in case back and crown, the water rating on this watch is 200 meters, and you've seen that on the dial as you look at this watch. Okay, let's just put that NATO back on and just show you the dial of the watch now. Okay, so this dial has a subtle sunburst. It's a blue dial, obviously. You can see it's definitely a kind of this very nice blue, I think, and it does have a subtle sunburst in it, and it's a sandwich style dial. So as I pan it, or as I show you these macro shots, hopefully you can see that there is a indentation for where all those hour markers are. It's actually a layer underneath the top surface of the dial, which is what we call sandwich. Right, printed minimalistic marks on the dial itself for the Boldr Voyager automatic 200 meters, and I really like that. Just minimalistic, doesn't say much, just says a few basic hints about what this watch is about. And then looking at the periphery, right, you can see this nice, I don't know what you call that, broken tram line, I guess, for the chapter ring, and there's probably a vintage callback there. And I really like, all these little details that they've gone into here. The hands themselves are simple baton style hands, okay, in brass as well, or at least the same brass color as the rest of the case, if not the actual same material. It's got a seconds hand with a rectangular part where the loom sits, and overall this watch is loomed with what they call superluminova in old radium. So it does have a little bit of a vintage patina look to it. It kind of just glows the standard type of color in the dark, and of course I'll put a loom shot for you guys to see how it looks like in the dark. Okay, moving on to the bezel on top there. So the bezel is a 120 click unidirectional dive style bezel. As I mentioned, it does have raised numerals, right? 10, 20, and then at the kind of 5 marks, so 5, 15, 25 marks, you have a kind of this raised, just a stick or rectangle, and in between, hopefully it's appreciable, you can see indentation. So in between are indented markings for the seconds or minutes in between. Okay, so that's nicely done. You know, you really got to put some work into this bezel to achieve that. It's not going to come off very easily. Certainly, I think it's a slightly more difficult thing to achieve than putting a bezel insert with printed markings here. Okay, and just show you how it clicks. Okay, not very loud, right? Maybe a little bit of backplay, but it's good enough. You know, it's certainly functional and feels relatively solid. Not the most solid bezel I have ever felt, but absolutely functional. And I think, you know, it does the job. It does what it says it's supposed to do here. Right, on top of the bezel and dial is what they call a vintage Superdome glass. And Superdome, in my understanding, that refers to a very specific Rolex acrylic. In this case, it's not actually acrylic, it's actually mineral glass, but it is K1 mineral glass. Let me know if you know specifically what K1 is, but as I understand it, K1 is one of the hardest grades of mineral glass that you can get. That's what I've found in the reading that I've done. Okay, so there we have it. That's the description of the watch. The band itself, you've seen me handle this. It's kind of this blue Zulu style, because these are rings, not just rectangular keepers. They're rings, Zulu style NATO, and you know, the rings are also in brass, and you know, it's got the company name kind of in that particular ring there, as well as a brass buckle. You know, so it's kind of nice that they've gone for the same look, the same material as the case to finish off the overall look of this watch, which is a pretty good looker. You know, I mean, look at it, how it matches up. I really like how, you know, how they finished this overall. Okay, so that's the watch itself. Let's put it on for the wrist shot for you guys now. And there we have it, the Boldr Voyager Adriatic color version on my 17 centimeter wrist. So remember, the bezel width is 42 millimeters and the lug to lug distance is 49. So it fits well for me. And again, you know, 15 millimeter to top of the glass there, despite the fact that it's got a NATO underneath there to add height, it actually wears a lot smaller than you may think. You know, it's just something about the case design and the way it sits on the wrist that makes it wear smaller than advertised. Okay, and I think that's a positive. That's actually not a negative feature, the fact that it wears so nicely. Okay guys, so that's the watch. You know, what have I particularly enjoyed about this? Look, I think it's a cool and different watch. It's cool and different in brass, and I think it's got a good design with a lot of vintage callbacks and vintage cues, which I enjoy. You know, so what am I referring to? Well, it's got that patina lume, so immediately you can see the lume is not white. It's got kind of this false patina to it. It's got that sandwich dial, which, you know, is again a callback to divers from the past. You got to do some work to get that. That tram line broken chapter ring, I think, it's also got this, you know, it's almost got an Art Deco appearance to it. I find that chapter ring, I really enjoy looking at that. Right, it's got a crafted bezel with those raised numerals and indentations, you know, like something to add depth and three-dimensionality to the actual case design here. It's got that gearing for the crown. And again, another cool little design feature, something they didn't have to do, but they did, you know, go that extra length to put that gear, and as well as the fact that it's got a double layer. It's not just a straight, simple crown design. I showed you the nice octopus artwork on the back there. And then, you know, they've gone for the rings as well on this NATO, not just straightforward rectangles, but a little bit more character, adding Zulu rings. I think, you know, it just adds a little bit different look to it. And then that dome glass, which is not bad at all. I mean, you can see the way it domes, it definitely gives a distortion at the edges there. And I think that's a positive thing in this particular watch, you know, the way that it plays with the visual appearance of the dial there. So many nice little features that are packed into this piece, which ostensibly at first looks pretty simple, but, you know, the more you look, the more you see. You know, it's got that workhorse NH35A movement, right? It's not the most world-beating movement, but you're gonna have some ability to trust it because it has a good track record of reliability. Now, what's the things to note about this watch? The weaknesses, I don't really have much to say. I can say that brass, because of its color, can be difficult to match with, clothing wise and all that. If you do try to match clothing and belts and whatever, it may be a little bit more difficult to match this than just a plain steel watch. And this includes when swapping in straps. So if I was going to swap this to another one of my NATOs, I do not have any other NATO with this color. So it would be a bit garish seeing polished steel next to this. I think, I'd probably be hesitant to swap this out for another NATO. And then I would say that the loom, it's serviceable, but it's not mind-blowing. It's certainly not anywhere near the performance of a Seiko diver in the loom. And that's it. That's all I have to say in terms of the negatives of this watch. Not much at all. I think there is a lot to like about this model and a lot to like about Boldr models. So guys, I hope you enjoy my review of this watch. If you have any experience about Boldr, I really would love to hear your thoughts, whether it's this watch or another watch that you have of their brand. So guys, thank you for sticking with me. If you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. I put out new content every week, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys next time.